Radio.com, the world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Good morning, good evening, and good night, wherever you are all around the world. Welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go on the world's greatest radio. You are now in touch with the compensatory concept. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is radio the way it should be heard. You tuned in to listen to Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a compensatory counter-racist code. Revised and expanded edition is now available at producejustice.com. In a few moments, when I give you the signal, we will take your calls and read your Gmails. So I will give you the addresses that you can do that with. But first, I want to start off with this, Mr. Fuller, before I introduce you. I received an interesting letter. You probably know more about this situation than I do, but it's from Brother Wright, and he simply wrote about race soldiers / police / slave catchers. And on my screen he said slave patrols called patrollers, paddy rollers, or paddy rollers by slaves were organized groups of white men who monitored and enforced discipline upon black slaves in the antebellum U.S. southern states. They also used blacks to track down other blacks. The slave patrol's function was to police slaves, especially runaways and defiant slaves. They also formed river patrols to prevent escape by boat. Slave patrols were first established in South Carolina in 1704, and the idea spread throughout the colonies. Slave patrols are the origin of police departments in this country. If a slave resisted capture, he or she was either beaten or killed on the spot. Mr. Fuller, you may recall back in the 60s when the police van showed up, we called the van paddy wagon without even understanding the origin of the word. Mr. Fuller, have you ever heard of that word paddy wagon, or do you recall any of this so far?
Yes, I remember the term, and at one time I remembered the term, how it originated, but I don't remember that how it originated now. Mm-hmm. I've forgotten how it was called paddy wagon. It had something to do with the ethnic group, I think, of the people who were the arresting officers at the time. Someone probably in the listening audience probably remembers that better than I do.
Yes.
But basically, these, in the system of racism, all laws are used in such a way that helps to support racism. So it's taken all kinds of forms all down through the years. Mm-hmm. And using black slaves to catch other slaves. Black slaves were used to beat other slaves. Yes. Or to do anything. When you're a master and you have set up a world prison system, you can get anybody to do anything that you want them to do. So this shouldn't be anything that surprises anyone. But when you run everything, not some things, when you run everything, you can get all of the people to do whatever you want done.
Yes, sir.
And you can mix and match them and switch them around or do whatever. You can have one person do the beating one day, and then the person that does the beating gets beaten the next day, if that's what you want.
Yes, sir.
Why? Because you are the master of everything that's going on, not some things, everything. So people can take their choices whether to keep breathing or not, because the penalty for not obeying masters sometimes, in many, many, many cases, is death. Most people don't want to die, at least not at that moment. Most people want to breathe another moment, another day, something like that. So they'll go along with it. Most people are that way. People who criticize other people for going along with systems still want to keep breathing themselves. So when they're faced with a situation, they might risk dying on some day, but maybe on that particular day, an individual may not want to die.
Yes, sir.
For some whatever reason. And so the person goes along and says, well, one of these days I'm not going to put up with this any longer. And on that same day, somebody decides not to put up with it any longer, and that person dies that day. But the other person looking at that will say, well, I don't mind dying, but I don't want to die right now. And so it's an individual choice. All people could face what they call liberty or death at any time. I've heard black people criticize other black people for putting up with things, but then they have to look at themselves. What do I put up with? And say, well, but my situation isn't as bad as theirs. Well, somebody standing behind that person could say, oh, well, my situation is worse than yours. I mean, or better than yours or whatever. And I mean, you're still here and I'm still here. So who is the judge?
I see. He goes on, he says, the actual wording of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States reads as follows. He does Section 1 and 2. The 13th Amendment says, Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Interesting. Then Section 2 says this, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. He goes on to write, it clearly states that in Section 1 that slavery is still legal in the United States of America. The white supremacists have changed the name from slave to convict, prisoner, or inmate in an incredibly effective effort to confuse the world into believing that slavery does not exist in the United States of America. The so-called police still wear a resemblance of the original badge, which I did look at, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. And then ending up, he says, the police slave catchers are doing today exactly what they have been doing for the past 300 plus years, capturing people for the purpose of enslavement. Also, it has remained consistent even to this day. If you have enough money, you can purchase your own freedom. Nothing has changed in this country since the onset of racism and white supremacy. It is exactly the same, covered up with trickery and semantics. Mr. Fuller, he wanted you to address that, since this is in the Constitution, Section 1 and 2, that it still exists. What is your thought on that as you look at the millions or hundreds of people who have been beaten, who have been enslaved? You've seen this on, or even heard about it. You've seen it on TV, i.e. Rodney King, Mr. Gray, the brother in New York, the sister, I think, is Sandra Bland down in Texas. And does it seem to you, Mr. Fuller, in your observance, and you've been around for a long time, that this practice still exists, still goes on? What are your thoughts on that?
People should not be puzzled by what we call law enforcement in a system of white supremacy. It's a world system. To even try to narrow it to some focus of saying America or the American system or in the United States or during the period of this time or that time. It all starts with whenever white supremacy started worldwide. And there's no such thing as it just being in so-called America. That doesn't exist. What we have here is the system of white supremacy. We don't even have an American system yet. Lots of people are talking about trying to achieve it, or an African system, or an Asian system. Why? Because if you're talking about African systems, American systems, or Asian systems, in their essence, you're talking about systems of justice, systems in which no person is mistreated, and no person, or rather all people who need help the most, get the most constructive help. Systems of justice. That's the only reason for being an Asian, or an African, or an American. These are ideal systems, all of them, because they all mean the same thing, but none of them exist. So if none of these systems exist, what is it that we're looking at every day that does exist? We have a worldwide system of white supremacy called racism. Call it that. Stop calling it by all kinds of other names. It doesn't have any other name outside of that. The system of white supremacy is the only government that really has any power, ultimate power, among the people of this planet. There are no so-called governmental systems. These are just slogans and whatnot and concepts. America is a wonderful concept because it means nobody's mistreated and everybody gets the help that they need that's of the most constructive value. The African system is the same thing. The Asian system is the same thing. They're all synonymous if you are being truthful. But none of these systems exist. Why? Because people who need help the most are not getting it. And people are being mistreated all over the world, everywhere, even as we speak. So you don't have any of these systems in place, but everybody should be striving to get the systems in place. And you can call it by any name, but a name that would be more universal was just systems of justice, systems of correctness, systems of peace. This is what we need. But you can make them synonymous with American, Asian, or African, because these words don't mean anything if they don't mean justice and peace and correctness. None of these words mean anything. You get a massive confusion. So all of the laws that are in place now, since we're talking about law, are for one purpose worldwide, and that is to support the system of white supremacy, all of the laws. So no one should be baffled about that. And when those laws are enforced and supported, that's what they're for. Cases in point. Right now, they're talking about Turkey. That's this morning's paper, Washington Post, October the 5th, 2016, page A10. They say that what you have going on in Turkey now, 12,800 police officers, quote unquote, police officers, were suspected of participating in a coup. Page A10, Washington Post, October the 5th, 2016, talking about police officers. See, that's the enforcement branch. But see, the truth is, you don't have police officers in a system of white supremacy. You have law enforcement officers, but the laws that are made are enforced to support what is already in place. And that's the system of white supremacy, either directly or indirectly, anywhere on the planet. Why? Because you only have one system. Just one, folks. Just one. Not a whole lot of different systems. Of course, you have electrical systems. You have systems of automotive systems. You have school systems and whatnot. But all of these systems in the system of white supremacy support the system of white supremacy. It's the only government on the planet. And all of the laws are designed to support that system. Another case in point, the Philippines. Washington Post again, newspaper, October 5th, 2016, page A1 through page A16. It says over 3,300 have been slain since Death Squad mayor became president. Now, this is the president of what we call the Philippines, and they are saying that he has had his law enforcement officers kill over 3,300 people since he has been the president. And what is this killing about? It's about drug busting, according to the article. Now, going back to the Godfather model, Godfather 1, the movie, what did they say? They're going to spread drugs among the colored people of the world. That's what the person said at a meeting. Now, this is a fictional movie, and that movie was made in the 1970s, early 1970s. By 1984, that was real. Drugs were spread all over the world, and the killing came with the drugs. Both people who were trying to mark off their turf, drug lords, you might say, they were killing people like they still are, and people who were opposed to drugs being disseminated among the population, who the law enforcement officers killing the people who are pushing the drugs. But who was behind the whole idea? Who was behind the whole idea? The white supremacists. It's a way of causing chaos and disorder among all of the non-white people of the planet. And you had, back in history, something called the Opium Wars. Study a little of that. It's all about the same thing. You spread drugs among the non-white people, get them to killing each other over the drugs, and then you kill them for killing each other over the drugs. Duh. So, it's a continuation of what? Chaos and confusion.
Yes, sir.
Which is what the white supremacists spread.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Talktainment Radio is a 24/7, no-charge, worldwide broadcasting facility that have hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, health, wellness, religion, and politics. Now, here's one that I would like to share with you, and it's simply called the Raw Deal Radio Show. Tom Dillard was born and raised in the east side of Columbus, Ohio, and he attended, of course, East High School, Muskingum College, and Case Western Reserve University. Tom is a licensed social worker. Tom is now retired and continues to work as an advocate for the African American community and has sought to use Talktainment Radio as his best medium to share information, motive, and inspire the African American community to realize our heritage and achieve our destiny. Join host Tom Dillard on the Raw Deal Show at 20th and Mount Vernon on TalkTainmentRadio.com. That is radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on the compensatory concept, and we are speaking with Neely Fuller Jr. And if you would like to get in contact with the show, you can by calling 1-877-932-9766. The phone lines are now open, and also you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. We're speaking about the law, and in particular race soldiers. And before we go off that topic, Mr. Fuller, I wasn't around then, but when you were speaking of what was happening, what's going on in Turkey and the Philippines, would you say that Emperor Tojo, and I wasn't around then, so I don't know too much about him, but I understand he was notorious for killing and so forth. Would he be like that, Hitler, Mussolini, and then you mentioned the Opium Wars?
Well,
for what you know about Tojo.
Oh, well, what I do know, what was recorded in history, is that he was a military leader.
Mm-hmm. In Japan, right? Yes, okay.
Yes, and during World War II. And that was his assignment, to conduct wars, or battles, rather, in the Far East, in the interests of the Emperor Hirohito at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's all there is about Tojo.
The reason why I brought him up is because of the killings and so forth that he introduced. The mass killings of that. But anyway, we'll move on from that. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question according to the code?
Thank you, Mr. Fuller, for your work. I think it's very interesting that you have definitions to describe the behavior of this global dynamics that's on us. You know, it took me many years to understand some of the bizarre behavior patterns that people from Europe have, and I never thought about putting a name to their behavior until I started reading your work. For instance, I noticed that you don't have that word crossfire tools. I used to get caught up in the crossfire between whites when they had their dispute, and they would use me as a tool against each other or to help their cause. A good example is when I went to college, I had German-American teachers, and I had German teachers from German. And I noticed it seemed like the German-American teachers were trying their best to flunk me out of school, while the ones from Germany was doing their best to pass me. I just said, what is going on here? But like I said, they were pissed off at each other. They were just using me in their crossfire.
Okay. Was there a question in there, ma'am, that you had for Mr. Fuller?
No, I thought it was interesting.
Okay. All right. Well, we thank you for your call very, very much so. Thank you. Okay. I guess with her, Mr. Fuller, that would be under VGQ with her knowledge of what she went through?
Yes. And that should be thought about. People should think about what she just said and compare that with their experiences and what they have observed, maybe in their own experiences,
yes.
Personal experiences.
Okay.
And see if there are some similarities there.
All righty. Let's go to line number 2. Line number 2. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question?
Yes, good morning. Not a question, but an observation in the USA Today paper on October 2nd. Seems like the White House, not seems, but it reads that the White House is looking to add a new racial category for Eastern people, MENA, which is Middle Eastern or North African. So I made the comment to support what I've been studying or listening to Mr. Fuller talk about in terms of confusion and adding more racial categories. So here it is, more confusion. Middle Eastern people, which is, where is the Middle East? Where is the Middle West, for that matter? Or North African. And so that's going to be a new racial category for the upcoming 2020 census.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Fuller, would you speak to that?
Yes. That comes under VGQ. You'd think about that, too, what the gentleman just said. And all of the different labels that keep coming up. The white supremacists are constantly inventing new terms to describe things in a way that they want things to be described in order to support what? In order to support the system of white supremacy. So they classify and reclassify things all the time. I mean, start off in the morning saying one thing, and in the evening saying something just opposite. They'll say anything. That is one of the things that the white supremacists are expert at.
Yes, sir.
Saying anything any kind of old way and sounding convincing. Because, and they have been able to do that all over the world. I mean, they'll say something in the morning, and then that evening they will say something just the opposite of what they said in the morning and say, well, it means the same thing. And you say, well, that couldn't mean the same thing. And they say, what did I say? I said it means the same thing. I said it means the same thing. So you just wasn't paying attention. That's what's wrong with you people. You don't pay attention. So now I'm saying this like I said it, and this is the truth. And then you say, well, what was that you said this morning? Because it's the opposite. It's not the opposite. It's the same thing. You just don't understand. Why don't you get some understanding, you people? You never have any understanding of anything. I have spoken. That's the end of the story.
End of the story. Okay. I got a Gmail from Brother Fard. He says this in the 8th area of people activity. Mr. Fuller, your assessment of whites having sexual relations with blacks, is that pedophilia? So what is it? Your assessment on why they do it. Why do they take advantage? Do you think they're evil, or is it perhaps because they can't get nobody white to have these relationships and marriage with? I'd rather be alone myself than to take advantage of anyone or date interracially. Oh, by the way, okay, yeah. He's asking those questions concerning your assessment of whites having sexual relations with blacks. Is that it's pedophilia?
Yes.
Or what is it? Yeah, okay.
Yes, child molestation. Why? Because the non-white people of this planet in the system of white supremacy are put in a childlike position. We are made to be in a childlike position in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. That just about covers everything. So if you have color in your skin, to a white supremacist, you are indeed a child, in their opinion, and in their enforcement, because they will force you to be in a childlike position. Childlike meaning what? Completely dependent. Dependent on whom? On the white supremacists. For education, for your economic system, how you use your time and energy, how much money you can make and where you can spend it and what you can spend it for, and how much you will give back to them after you get it, after they give it to you, because they are the source of all of it, what your education is going to be used for, and when it comes to the bedroom, sex, who is going to go to bed with whom? They determine that. Even when some non-white people think that, oh, no, I make up my mind who I'm going to go to bed with. No, you don't. You are going to do that only when the white supremacists either directly or indirectly approve of it. But every time the white supremacists have sexual intercourse or so-called homosex with a non-white person in the system of white supremacy, that is child molestation.
Child molestation. Okay, TalkTameAtRadio.com. We go where you go. Okay, welcome back to TalkTameAtRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the TalkTameAtRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and you can get in contact with the show by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Mr. Fuller, before we go on, could you address your book?
the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Now, these words, that's a kind of a long title. In fact, it is a long title, and the title doesn't mean anything until actually you look into the book, and it will explain what each one of the words of that title means. The United Independent Compensatory Code /System /Concept. But then there's a general title in the new revised expanded edition called A Compensatory Counter-Racist Code. And it's a textbook, workbook for thought, for speech, and for action for victims of white supremacy. And white supremacy is defined as racism. Racism is defined as white supremacy. It's implied here and said outright, there's no other form of racism other than white supremacy. White supremacy is racism. Racism is white supremacy. And the world is made up of two major categories of people, really. Major categories. White supremacists and their victims, who are the victims being people who are classified as non-white. Black, brown, red, yellow, tan, beige, whatever. Anybody with color in his or her skin. Now, that doesn't mean that all white people are white supremacists. It means that those who are. And those who are smarter and more powerful than those who aren't. So actually, in a way of speaking, within the context of the system of white supremacy, truth be told, the white people who are not white supremacists, in a way of speaking, do not count within the equation of opposing the system of white supremacy. Why? Because the white supremacists, the white people who believe in white supremacy are smarter and more powerful than those who don't. So that leaves the non-white people as being flat-out victims.
Okay.
They have to answer to those white people who believe in and who practice the system of white supremacy, which is the only real government on the planet.
All righty. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr.?
I'd just like to make a comment, if I may, my good brother, since we all trying to advance humanity. I wouldn't say the white supremacists are more smarter than the Caucasians who are non-white supremacists. I would say they are more violent and more deadly because white people who are not white supremacists, when they try to stand up to them, they get the same fate that we get. Now, I ain't heard nothing I ain't heard 1,000 times. And I ain't going to say nothing I ain't said 1,000 times. Karl Marx said the economy is the prime source of social change. That's why the white man don't allow blacks to compete. That's why he burned their town, steal their inventions. There's no way he going to let us compete in this white supremacy country. Because if he let us compete here, there will be social change. Now, lest we forget, these psychopaths we are dealing with are conquerors. They slaughter people by the millions. Stop trying to pretend that it's not true. They haven't stopped slaughtering people. They are not going to stop. Black people are next on the agenda for extermination. This is why we're seeing so much crazy stuff going on in this country. There's a little small town in Illinois called Kankakee. They found 4 black boys shot to death. They are killing us across this country. The reason they are doing that, they are creating an atmosphere for our extermination to take place. They are sitting the table for it, and they are getting the world prepared for it. The best thing any of us can do is try to put that point out to anybody we know in the world. Let them know what's going to happen to us here. Because once it go down, we are not going to have no voice. They are going to shut down this media. You won't be able to holler across the street. This is what they're going to do. This is their agenda. They are never, and after we are exterminated, the Africans are going to be next. Then they'll probably pick somebody else. This is what they'll do. They haven't stopped, and we are next, and many of our people, we better get that in our head.
All right, my brother. Thank you very much for your comment. Okay, I think that would go under VGQ. Mr. Fuller, there is an article under the countercurrentnews.com by Tasha Sharifa indicating the subject was Chicago's top cop says he's breaking the police code of silence. Now, that's Chicago's top cop. Being all that stuff has been going on, maybe in correlation with the brother that was just on said about killing people. Kankakee is in Illinois. But there's been a lot of this going on. I guess I'm not a policeman, so I don't know too much about this code of silence. Have you ever heard of that, Mr. Fuller?
I've heard of the code of silence. I mean, like forever. Yes. But that doesn't say that all law enforcement officers have the intent of mistreating people. We're just talking about correct treatment and incorrect treatment. That's all we're talking about here. The correct treatment of people when you talk about law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And some law enforcement people support the system of racism directly, indirectly, deliberately, and many of them, the rest of them, support it indirectly. Why? Because that's the only system in place.
Yes.
But every law enforcement officer should try to, as best as he or she can, not support the system of racism, which is just about almost impossible to do.
Yes.
Because we're all in that one system. But at least try to produce the system of justice as best you possibly can.
Yes.
And many, many, many officers try to do the correct thing, the just thing.
Yes.
Many of them do that all day.
Yeah, the article
all night.
The article did not say that all policemen were like that. It did not say that. I read the article. It did not say that. But what it did was point out that Chicago's top cop, this was in the article, says that he is breaking the police code of silence. And I thought that was interesting because it wasn't someone who was in the middle group. It was someone who had been at the very top levels where the decisions were made by race soldiers within the police department, in particular Chicago, and that this code of silence line or whatever does exist, and he couldn't take it anymore, according to the article I read by the countercurrentnews.com, Tasha Sharifa. She wrote the article. But he did not say that all policemen were racist. Did not say that. That would be just like saying all white people are racist. And I've heard you say many times that that is not a true statement. All white people are not racist. Am I correct?
That's correct. You always go with the truth. It's the racists that always support falsehood. So no non-white person should ever support anything that's false. I mean, we always talk about keeping it real, and we should mean that. Reveal the truth, but always reveal the truth in a manner in which justice is helped to be established.
Alrighty.
That's the way you do it.
TalkTameAtRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the Talk Tame It Radio app, TalkTameAtRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and you are welcome to call in at 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7, Mr. Bobby, at gmail.com. Let's see what comes up. Okay, here's one that comes up. It says, Mr. Fuller, what are your thoughts on how non-white people, especially black people, can overcome our fear of white people? Many blacks act as if we are tough, but we are tough towards one another, but are fearful of white supremacists.
Well, the answer is stop pretending that white supremacy doesn't exist. We're already prisoners of war. The fear that black people have of the white supremacists, they should have it. There's something to fear. You know, that's natural. Fear serves a purpose, but you want to have an intelligent fear, particularly when you encounter law enforcement in the form of people pretending to be police officers when they're really race soldiers. And so you have a code. That's what I tried to write in the books, a code for how to act in the system of white supremacy, thought, speech, and action. The best way to think, according to some suggestions, and the best way to speak, and the best way to act. And so when it comes to encounters with any law enforcement officer, particularly one armed with badge and gun, particularly a gun, any type of weapon, anywhere in the world, don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. These are the three don'ts. Don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. I mean, trying to look tough, trying to talk tough and all like that is not going to get you anything except something that you don't want. And those who try it usually find that out and then wind up apologizing later on for their behavior. Don't do anything that you have to apologize for. Be consistent. So you know if you're not going to win, and you just about know that, why be an actor? Why try to pretend? This is not 10th grade on the school ground when you're in that type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But we keep making that huge 5th grade mistake over and over again. Many of us, not all. But don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee.
All righty.
Comply with utmost courtesy. Why? Because if you do anything else, you most certainly are most likely to lose. L-O-S-E. Why do something that's guaranteed to be a loss? You wouldn't do it at the gambling table, knowing full well that you can't win. You know that the roulette wheel is rigged, and you still put your money on it. That's a form of acute insanity. We need to stop pretending. We're prisoners of war. Act like it.
Good example. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. What is your question according to the code?
Good morning. I was faced with a question from some friends about good cops and bad cops. And I'm based on the code and what I hear people say, you got race soldiers, and not everybody's a race soldier. Well, I wanted to get your opinion on my thought process. When I look at the cops, I no longer do the good and bad. I see every cop as an accomplice. If you're associated with someone in the organization that you're in and they're a murderer, and you're a part of that organization, and you don't speak up and you don't try to fight it, I see them as an accomplice. What do you think about that thought process?
Mr. Fuller?
That's true, but we're all accomplices because when you're a prisoner of war, you are a supporter of the prison system just by being there. That's all you have to do, being in the prison. If you are a prisoner in a prison, you are supporting the prison.
You're going to have to explain that one.
All non-white people everywhere on the planet are prisoners of war. And so if you're a prisoner of war, you are supporting the prison that you're in. You go through the routine. You obey the prison rules in order to keep breathing. You were born in prison. You didn't have an option on that. It's really not your fault. See, so one prisoner pointing to another is like the two people depicted in the movie Gone with the Wind. One black person telling another, both of them slaves now. You ain't the one supposed to say quitting time. I'm the one supposed to say quitting time. Well, one slave telling another how the plantation is run and how it should be run, but both of them, regardless of what they say, are slaves. You don't overlook that. And both of them are on the same plantation, supporting the plantation, no matter what arguments they have with each other about what is right, what is wrong, and what the other one ought to do and what the other one ought to say. They can go on like that forever. At some point, they have to deal with, hey, both of us are here on this plantation. And it doesn't make any difference what you call me and what I call you. At the beginning of each and end of each day, we both do what Master say. We both do what Master say. Big Negro, little Negro, don't make no difference. All slaves. We just got different ways of looking at our slavery and what our position is. But the position is absolutely the same.
Wow. Did you have another comment on that, brother?
Yeah, I guess just a comment on that. I see what he's saying, that it wouldn't be a prison if it wasn't prisoners. Hey, what the brother called in and said, "Oh, we're gonna the white supremacists gonna kill off all the black people." Well, I've heard Dr. Fuller say in other words that if you kill all the non-white people, who are they going to be supreme? How would they be supreme? They will have none to be supreme over if they kill all of us all. So I'm using that thought process in regards to what he just said. There wouldn't be a prison if it wasn't for prison.
Is that true, Mr. Fuller?
Well, that's the way I've explained it in my book. Like I said, all opinions among victims of racism are equal until proven otherwise. That's the way that works. That comes under VGQ. So my opinion of this thing about exterminating all of the non-white people on the planet, if the white supremacists wanted to do that, and this is strictly my opinion, and I've said so in the book, they would just simply announce it. We're tired of all these people of color sharing this planet with us. We're just tired of them. They're nothing but a nuisance. They're in the way. They don't know how to do anything. I mean, they don't know how to think about anything. I mean, they're just a bunch of nothing. And so we white supremacists, we had a conference last night, and we have decided to get rid of them. And we're going to announce it. And they can. When you got all of the muscle, you can announce it. I mean, who are you afraid of other than your creator? That would be the only fear that they would have if they had that plan. So they could announce it to the entire world and tell everybody, all of the non-white people, you better gear up to fight us. Because we're definitely going to eliminate all of you people, black, brown, red, yellow, everybody with color in his or her skin. We are going to depopulate this particular planet of all of you, because all of you are worthless.
Okay, and then
even exist.
Okay,
and they could announce that. They could announce it and give us time to try to get our act together. Say 5 years, and they sit back and watch and laugh at us because they'll say, "You ain't gonna be able to do it in 5 years." But in 5 years, I'm gonna exterminate all of you. But I will give you a sporting chance to try to get your act together in 5 years, knowing full well that after that 5-year deadline, I'm gonna kill you all. Go right ahead. because you're too dumb to get your act together. You spend that time mostly fussing with each other about how to go about protecting yourself from me. I know you because I made you what you are. I know how you think. So when the deadline comes, I'll just kill you all. Nothing can defend you from me. There's nobody, no extra people coming from Mars or someplace to defend you from me. You don't even know how to feed yourselves without me. None of you.
So
all over the planet.
So
see, that's what white supremacy means.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most awesome force other than the Creator himself or herself or itself on this planet.
So then you're, from what I understand what you're saying, then they are letting us exist?
Absolutely. And for what reason?
Yeah, for what reason?
And people have often asked me that down through the years, what's the purpose of white supremacy? I say the purpose of white supremacy is white supremacy. That's what people can't understand. And if the details of it is, what do you get out of it if you're a white supremacist? You get the three things that everybody wants, but you get it on a grand scale and an evil scale. And that is what? Fun, glory, and material gain. Everybody likes that.
Wow.
Every baby on the planet likes to have fun. F-U-N. Just a simple thing. Black people like fun. White people like fun. The white supremacists like fun. But they want fun, they want glory, and they want material gain. All people want these things, but they want it through a system that they have found very easy to pull off, and they pulled it off, and they don't want to give it up.
Okay.
But you can have the same things, same three things, through a system of justice. But they have gotten so used to the idea of mistreating people based on color, they don't even want to try justice. They say, why give up a good thing for something that might be questionable?
Okay, we're going to have to leave that one there. Thank you for your call, brother. Thank you for your call. All right. Whew. Okay. Ed, you know what? I'm going to take that one out. Do we have time or should we wait to the break? Okay, wait to the break? Okay. Okay. Hold on, caller. We're going to get you on the other side of the break. Mr. Fuller, that was whew, man, I'm almost at a loss for words. That last statement, I'm gonna have to really ask questions about that one because I myself don't really understand.
Needs to be repeated over and over again, and then examine. So I always tell people, never believe anything Neely Fuller says or anything anybody else says about race, racism, or counter-racism. Look at it for its logic. Look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. Look at your own experiences, and then make your own assessment. I always tell people, don't give up your individuality to anybody, Neely Fuller or anybody else that comes down to fight. Use your own mind to make your own assessment. Listen to everybody, white and non-white. Listen to everybody, but make up your own mind based on what you see going on and what you think is really what the real deal is.
Wow.
It's united independent. That's what that means. You can unite it, be united in what you intend to do.
Yes.
But you be independent in how you get there.
All righty. That's all righty. Welcome back to the second hour of the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. on TalkTapeMedradio.com. We go where you go on the world's greatest radio. I am Mr. Bobby, the co-host of the compensatory concept. And, of course, this is radio the way it should be heard. Our topic today has been the law. We've had several comments about that and several calls, as a matter of fact, and a couple of Gmails, which we will get to. And if you'd like to get in contact with the show, you may do so by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7MrBobby at gmail.com. Let's go to the phone line since his brother's been holding. Okay, line number 2. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Thank you for waiting, and what is your question?
Greetings, host, and greetings, Mr. Fuller. My question this morning is regarding cohabitating with suspected white supremacists. I'm in a situation where the rent in my community is pretty high, and I'm in a situation where I need to take on roommates. Oftentimes, the only people who qualify for staying in this financially are people who are suspected white supremacists. My question is, what are Neely Fuller's thoughts on cohabitating with suspected white supremacists? What are some experiences that he's had, and what are the best ways to remain codified while having to take on roommates that may be suspected white supremacists?
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
I hope I understand the question. Cohabit, meaning what?
Living in the same apartment, different rooms.
Oh, sure. You're in the same world. What's the difference? You're in the same world, on the same planet. Just because there's a wall between you or somebody, or not a wall, there's not a wall between you and someone when you're standing at the bus stop or when you're walking down the street. Where's the wall? So the wall doesn't mean anything. You're on the same planet. So that's the way you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of these artificial lines, just artificial lines, including a wall, that's something that people put up. That doesn't mean anything in particular. So if you're in an apartment building or in a neighborhood or on a certain street, no, that doesn't mean anything at all. Black people we have been, more than anybody, we have been taught about walls and the significance of walls. And walls have been made to be significant in the existence of all of the non-white people on the planet. You often hear that term, W-A-L-L, wall. I'm going to put a wall up here. I'm going to put a wall up there. And we think in terms of walls because we wind up in little boxes called cells with walls. Many of us. And we become accustomed to that. Why? The white supremacists want all of the non-white people to think in terms of walls. A wall here, a wall there, a fence here, a fence there. This is fenced off. Doors here, doors there, with huge locks on them. Everywhere you find black people, whether they're in a prison cell or whether they're in what you call the hood, we have what? 4 and 5 locks on a door. And the door is in what? A wall. To keep what? Us safe. Safe from what? From some type of hostility going on. And where does the hostility come from? Directly or indirectly from the white supremacists. So, they build these walls up in our minds even. So we walk around thinking in terms of walls, walls, walls. Don't think in terms of walls. Think in terms of people and how you interact with them and increase the quality of your interaction with people. One person with another, including white people. Eventually we're going to have to do that if we're going to be on the same planet. And all the indications are that we're going to be on the same planet, or even if we're on other planets, we'll be on the planet with white people. Because most likely they will be the people who will get there first.
Yes.
So any black people who are thinking about going to another planet are most likely going to encounter white people. So we're going to have to come to some kind of constructive understanding at some point. And the sooner, the better.
The better, right.
So, but the banner right now should be replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. That's the first order of business.
Oh, okay.
And then we can work out the details later.
All right. Thank you, caller, for your call.
much. Thank you.
Mr. Fuller, you said, according in the eighth area of people activity, a question came up: is it correct to blame the white supremacists for the destructive ways that non-white males and non-white females interact with each other? And you indicated that you said yes, it is racist man and racist woman, white supremacists collectively, who through the system of white supremacy systematically produce the general conditions that result in non-white males and non-white females being taught, trained, and or forced into interacting with each other in a tacky, trashy, terroristic, and or destructive manner. The white supremacists work to guarantee that non-white males and females will function in this conflict with each other in all the areas of activity, including, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And then you had counter war. So it is correct to blame the white racists for this.
Absolutely. The white supremacists are to blame for all of our behavior. Why? Because they are our only teachers. We don't have any teachers other than them. That's why we copy a lot of the things that they do, gangsterism and all like that. We got that from them. We walk around, with guns, that they manufacture and talking about this is my piece. I'm packing and I can do this and this is my neighborhood. This is my turf. When they are not really in control of anything, when the white supremacists come around, because all they have to do is say, hey, I'm putting a sign on your grandmother's house, which is where you're staying, because they saw to that you're not going to have a house of your own. So they put the sign on your grandmother's house saying, condemned. And all of you people in your hood are going to be out of here by the end of next year because we're going to put a shopping center here. We're going to gentrify this place. Look at that word, gentrify. This is no longer going to be the hood. You're going to find another hood, but the only hood you're going to find is one that I got set up for you.
Okay.
Over on the other side of the tracks where you started out.
By the shack down the
It's called psycho-racism. In other words, they keep moving non-white people around every so many years. Just about time you get established in one place, they turn that place into a place that you don't even want to be. So you're ready to move. But what we don't understand is the place that they got set up for us to go, it's not so much where you're leaving, it's where you're going when you do leave. Now, the place where they have set up for you to go, when you get there, it's going to be real nice because it was recently gentrified, comparatively speaking, 20 years ago, all right? But here, the white people are now, one by one, two by two, are moving out. So now you move in where they were. But then all of the resources are taken away from that area. So that becomes just like the area that you just left. But it takes about 20 years for that to happen. Then the people that move from there go right back to where you just left. All right? And build it up and make it all pretty and all like that and start the cycle all over again. We haven't caught on to that yet.
So do we go down to the shack by the track on that?
Well, the shacks by the track don't even exist anymore.
Okay.
That's a term that I made up because I used to observe that a lot of those shacks used to be by the track where black people were.
With the room in the back.
Yes, with the room in the back. That was a safety net.
Yeah.
Where black people who would move here and there and go from here and there looking for jobs, that's usually why we move, and the jobs would play out like they always did. But we had a place to go when the sun went down. But now, those shacks by the track don't exist anymore. They came and built highways right alongside of those railroad tracks where those shacks used to be. Super highways. So now, if you get on a highway, you might notice that sometimes you're right alongside of a railroad track. You see trains passing as you're driving.
That is true.
Down a superhighway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, those highways used not to be there in the northwestern hemisphere. It used to be shacks along there. A lot of those shacks were on what we call railroad property. But the railroad people, the people that ran the railroads, didn't care much because nobody wanted to be down. That wasn't prime real estate.
No.
Nobody wanted to be by the tracks anyway. So black people used to build little shacks around there back when black people knew how to build shacks. Black people don't know how to build anything now because they used to build places for white people, but they cut them off with things called unions, took the carpentry all out of the schools and all like that. So how many black people do you know that know how to fix anything now? It used to be thousands and millions of black people that know how to build a house from scratch out of old pieces of lumber.
Wow.
A lot of people don't remember that. Most people are not that old to have seen it done. Coming along, I'm old enough to remember when many black people used to get together on a Saturday afternoon. That was the only time they had off, or on a Sunday sometimes after church. They would get together, 6 or 8 of them, and go down and build what they call a shotgun house. It wasn't much, but it was a roof over your head, a good solid roof. I've been in some of those houses, raised up in some, all right? They were excellent, solid houses. They could stand a lot of storm and rain. They weren't much, just maybe 3 rooms. But I've been in some of them, and there were many, 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 many of them. But along came the white supremacists and say, these Negroes know how to build stuff. We're going to fix that so the next generation won't know how to do anything except stand in front of a place that is built and beg, because they won't know anything about carpentry or masonry or how to make anything with their hands. In fact, a lot of black people started getting an attitude because we were brainwashed into it. Booker T. Washington was correct about some things, just like W.E.B. Du Bois was correct. Both of them were correct, but they were arguing with each other about whether to be carpenters and bricklayers and what you do slave labor. And W.E.B. Du Bois, I understand, always talked about the talented 10th. In other words, get to be an intellectual, read books, get to be professors and whatnot. The truth is, we should do both. Be builders, know how to use your hands. I think that's where the word handsome came from. Some hands. Handsome. Know how to use your hands along with your brain. The white supremacists say if you're a Negro, you can use one or the other. If you can use your hands, you can't use your brain. If you use your brain, you can't use your hands. That's the recipe for disaster.
I got you. That sounds like some sugar honey iced tea. TalkTameAtRadio.com is a 24/7 no-charge worldwide broadcasting facility that have hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, health, wellness, religion, and politics. Now here's one that I would like to share with you again, and it's called The Real Deal Radio Show. Tom Dillard was born and raised on the east side of Columbus near Clifton and Taylor Avenues. He attended the famous East High School here in Columbus and went to Muskingum College and also Case Western Reserve University. Tom is a licensed social worker, and he is now retired but continues to work as an advocate for the African American community and has sought to use Talk Team at Radio as the best medium to share information, to motivate and inspire African American community to realize our heritage and achieve our destiny. Join Tom Dillard on The Real Deal Show on Thursdays. What day is that, Ed, that it's on? Thursdays? Okay, anyway, but it's here on TalkTainmentRadio.com. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, on the world's greatest radio, TalkTainmentRadio.com. And you can get in contact with the show by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. We are going to go to the phone lines, and line number one, you are up next with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question according to the code?
Well, I just want to comment on Mr. Fuller, something Mr. Fuller said. Man, this show is so good, I can eat it. White supremacy is confusing. And it is confusing on purpose. A white supremacy will lynch a black man and go lay with a black woman or a young black boy. But that will not mean he's not a white supremacy, and that will not mean that he do not want the masses of black people exterminated. That's all in the game. To the victor goes the spoils. Now, exterminations do not mean all the time that they are going to kill every single person of that race. They could have killed every single Indian in this country, but they didn't. There's a few Indians out west somewhere, but the Indians were exterminated when you look up the word extermination. They was in Canada. They was in New York, Florida, all the way across this country. Now they in one little small area. They were exterminated, although a few Indians are still alive. Okay. When our extermination comes, they are going to keep some of these young black boys and girls for their pleasure. Strom Thurmond was a white supremacist. He impregnated a black woman. Let's not get confused here, because these murderers want to lay and have sex with somebody that they have exterminated and that's their people. That's what they do. But it does not mean. Now, a lot of these islands were small. They was able to kill every single person. Those people had nowhere to run. But if it was some woman on that island or two or three he wanted to keep, he would have kept that woman, and he would have killed the rest of them. So extermination all the time does not. They're not gonna kill every single black in this country. They might keep 1 million. They might keep 500,000. But that does not mean we would not have been exterminated.
All right, my brother. You are very passionate about what you're saying. Okay. We are speaking in the fifth area of people activity, which is the law. That is the on-topic subject, but you can call in to discuss any subject. You don't have to use that subject. But, Mr. Fuller, under that, you said avoid using the term. This is what you said. According to page 152 in the fifth area law, you said avoid using the term police to describe, and you underlined, any person now in existence. Use the term enforcement officials to describe any person who uses force to enact the will of those who have dominant power. Never refer to a police officer as being a racist. Can you explain that?
Yes. A police officer is a person that practices justice. Nobody practices justice in a system of white supremacy. That's a contradiction. You can't have justice and white supremacy on the same planet at the same time. It's impossible. So justice doesn't exist. That's a concept that everybody should be trying to produce. You have to produce justice. That's why the name of my website is called producejustice.com. That's how you can go to it and get the textbook for victims of white supremacy. That's why I call it that. That's why I chose that. That's what everybody on the planet right now is supposed to be thinking of doing. From the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed at night. Why? Because that's the most important product that needs producing. Now, what is justice? There is no legal definition for the word justice. I didn't find that out until 1994. I think I saw it on a TV program where it was being discussed. There's actually no legal definition for the word justice. So you can see why maybe it's a very confusing word. So I made up a compensatory. Compensatory meaning making up what's missing. That's why I call it the compensatory code. The compensatory definition, which I have in the word guide, and I use throughout the revised expanded edition of the basic code book, and that is the definition of justice is two parts, because I tried to do it in a way that people could understand it and put it to use. Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's part one. And part two, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, that situation, a justice situation, does not exist anywhere on the planet. So a law enforcement officer, in the form of what we call police officers or anybody else, would have to be a person that practices justice. If that law enforcement officer is indeed a person that practices justice.
Okay.
But you can't have this. You can't have justice anywhere on the planet in a system of white supremacy.
Okay.
So we call them law enforcement officers. So what laws are we enforcing? That's the laws that are already in place. And the laws that are already in place are enforcing what? The laws that the white supremacists say will support white supremacy.
Okay. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number one, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. What is your question according to the code?
Hello. My question is as follows. Back on September 9th of 1971, there was a prison uprising in Attica, New York, at Attica Correctional Facility.
Yes.
And that it lasted a few days. Governor Rockefeller and the state governor came in and killed prisoners and guards who were involved in that uprising. Now, it just so happens that today, back September 9th of this year, some prisoners across the country in different states staged a strike against the slave labor, they're calling it. Major media is not covering it a lot, but they did that in the 45th anniversary of the riots at Attica Prison in New York. My question is, I've heard you, Mr. Fuller, talk about Shawshank Redemption, and I'm going to be watching that again soon. But these prisoners across the country, a lot of them, are striking. How effective do you think that might be? What's your thoughts on that? I don't know if you've heard about that or not, Mr. Fuller, but there are some prisoners who are trying to change their prison status. How successful they'll be, I don't know, because the folks in Attica 45 years ago were murdered by the state, and they blamed it on the prisoners.
Mr. Fuller?
Well, they take that chance. Anytime you do anything against someone who is in position to harm you, it's up to the person who is in person or persons who are in position to harm you to stop you from doing it, whether or not they want to stop you from doing it, or do something else like pay attention to what you are asking for and satisfy whatever it is that you're asking for. It's up to the person who has power over you in any situation. So that's a call for them to make. It could happen. It could happen that someone will say, well, we're not paying any attention to your strike. In fact, if you come out here calling yourself being on strike and you do it in a manner which I disapprove of, I might just decide to kill you, in which case they will, because they have the power to do it. If you have a situation that's dominated by the white supremacists, and if that is the situation, a white non-white thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's white and non-white mixed among the prisoners, well then it's the white supremacists' call to decide whether or not they will make the white people, if they decide to kill people, white sacrifices. Because I described that in the book. The white supremacists sometimes sacrifice huge numbers of the white people. And the book calls them white sacrifices.
Yes, okay.
In order to support what? The overall system. In other words, it's a business.
Okay, but now, like the caller said, what if the prisoners did take over? What would they replace it with? They took it over. What would it be replaced with?
Oh, well, then what I call greater confinement. All they can do is just get whatever it is that they were asking for. Maybe better conditions. Maybe it's too crowded in the prison or something like that. Usually, just look at whatever it is that they say are their demands.
Okay.
Which really are nothing but requests. They can't demand anything because they don't have the muscle.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Black people, generally, we need to stop using that term. We demand this, we demand that. When you demand something, it's like the Corleones. I'll go back to the movie reference again. Don Corleone, when he sent his emissary to talk to a movie mogul about a part that he wanted for a friend of his, he said, and in the negotiations, it was expressed to the person that they were making the request of in mob language. He said, the Don, when he makes a request, he only does it once. In other words, the next time something terrible might happen to you, he doesn't ask but once. Begging is asking more than once. Making a request is just that, a request. So when you demand something, it means you don't demand twice.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It means you make a request once, and then the next time, the person that you made the request of will find out that they will get hurt real bad if the request is not met.
All right. Thank you for your call, caller. TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can check. Righty, welcome back to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go, and you can download the TalkTainmentRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and this morning we have been discussing the fifth area of people activity, which is the law. So you can direct your questions that way, or you can also go off topic to any subject that you would like to discuss or ask Mr. Fuller. You can call in by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at mrbobby@gmail.com. Before we go to the next call, in that fifth area, Mr. Fuller, you said this on page 153 of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, Revised Expanded Edition. You said that while in the presence of law enforcement persons and in your general interactions with them, you said do the following: be calm, answer all questions. If you're not absolutely certain of the answer to a question, say that you're not sure. Do not use any profane language, and do not do anything or say anything that may cause a greater problem. Then you have police soldiers. Always suspect that a white person is a white supremacist or racist if he or she approaches you with a weapon. As long as white supremacy, which is racism, exists, expect to be maimed, killed, or falsely accused by any white person who confronts you by presenting himself or herself as some form of, quote, law enforcement official, police person, sheriff, constable, investigator, soldier, or etc. Can you explain that statement?
Yes, I think it's self-explanatory. In a system of white supremacy, anybody who approaches you who is white in a manner that you perceive to be hostile or maybe opposed to you may be a race soldier, meaning a white supremacist, sometimes in the guise of a law enforcement officer. So, if that person is really, in reality, a race soldier, expect to be killed. Expect to be killed. And if you are not able to protect yourself, then you have to comply. Look at it as a guard coming up to you in a prison, which you're already in the prison, meaning the world. You're already in the world. So you're already in a prison system, in the system of white supremacy. You have color in your skin. You're approached by somebody in a semi-hostile manner or in a hostile manner or in something you perceive to be hostile or opposed to you, and that's how you perceive it, and the person is white and the person is armed, you are at a disadvantage. Act like it. Don't act like you're in utopia, that you're in a pleasure palace. You're in a prison. Act like a prisoner. You're already taken prisoner. Taken as a prisoner.
Yes.
Right. You're already behind the barbed wire, whether you're looking at it or not. That's where you are.
Yes, sir.
You're restricted. That's all a prisoner is, a person that's restricted. Restricted on the basis of what? On the basis of color. On what you can do, what you can say, where you can go, how you can act. You're restricted.
Okay.
Be aware of that 24/7.
All right.
Every breath that you take.
Every breath.
Wherever you happen to be on the entire planet.
All right. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question according to the code?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. My question I have for Mr. Fuller are the white people that are alleged to be working against racism that might write books about racism, or they do lectures and stuff like that. Mr. Fuller, how should we, handle white people like that, basically, that claim to be against racism, that write about it, and they go around speaking about it, but it seems like nothing changed. Like, it's not a new phenomenon, white people coming out and willing to expose it, but you look around and the evidence say otherwise, so should we still suspect these white people have been racist even though they claim to be anti-racist?
Mr. Fuller?
According to the code, every white person in the system of white supremacy who is able, underline the word able, to be a white supremacist should be suspected of being one, regardless of what they say. Should be suspected of being one. Why? Based on logic, based on a concept of justice. It's the reason being you don't have a master list. I don't have one of who is a racist and who isn't. So you don't know. So a white person who says they're against racism and they come around making speeches about it and all like that, you still suspect that that person, according to counter-racist logic, you suspect that that person could be a racist. You take that position automatically if that person is able to be one. The person has to be able to be one. That's the only criteria.
Able.
Right.
Okay.
Now, how do you react to that person? If the person says they come to help, just stand back and watch and see what help they're going to provide. That's all. You don't criticize it. You suspect the person could be a racist, but if the person says that they're going to help, just like you would look at it like if you were actually in a prison cell and the warden comes into your cell on an inspection tour and says he came into your cell to help, that he's going to give you new mattresses, that he or she is going to paint the walls, that he or she is going to bring a television set that you didn't have before, that the food is going to be better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you stand there at attention, really, or you sit there if they allow you to relax, and you sit there on your bunk and you watch and see if they're going to do what they say that they're going to do.
So watch
and
them.
You don't make any comment at all, except whatever you get from them, you thank them. Sure, courtesy. Thank them for what they brought. They made things much better, even in your prison condition. They gave you things that you didn't have. You accept that, but still suspect that that person is still a racist.
Wait a minute.
On a plantation, sometimes massa comes down to the shacks and brings extra food. Now, you can accept the food or reject it, but if you're sitting there starving, take the food. I mean, so that you don't starve. And you thank Master for bringing the food, but understand, Master is still Master.
Mr. Fuller, wait a minute now. There was an organization that went and spread, went and said that they were going to help some Africans, so they brought them blankets. And you know the organization, I'm not going to name their names, but the blankets were infected with the virus that caused AIDS. And you said thank them for doing something like that, or for bringing the blankets? I mean, help me understand that.
No, I'm saying they had that option anyway. I mean, they could not bring you any blankets at all.
But
just let you freeze to death.
But the blankets were infected with a virus that caused AIDS.
Yes, they only found this out after the fact. But I'm saying you're in a prison. That's what we can't keep. We can't allow ourselves to forget that for 1 second. In a prison, you are totally, not in an option way, you are totally at the mercy of the people who run the prison. Like we mentioned the movie Shawshank Redemption. Andy the Frame understood that. That's why when he went to talk to the warden says, I'll talk to you, Andy. Come on in my office. And so Andy went and talked and started talking about some things that he believed and all like that. And he used a word that the warden didn't like. He used the word obtuse. And the warden says, you come in my office and call me obtuse, I'll show you obtuse. I'll put you in the hole, which he did. The warden has command, complete command, even when the warden is relaxed, and you're relaxed, and you're having what you call maybe a decent conversation, just one-on-one between you and the warden. But you are a prisoner, and the warden is still the warden. The warden can have you executed, like that warden did have little Tommy executed, had him killed in the prison, because that's the type of warden he was, all right? But he's the warden. He has absolute power. So you accept what you can get, like Andy accepted the library. He accepted the better position in the warden's office, so he didn't have to work in the carpentry shop or being out there tarring the roofs like he had to do in former years. I mean, he just worked for the warden and got benefits for doing so. But the warden is still the warden, and the prisoner is still the prisoner. And they have absolute power. If they want to give you a disease, they'll give it to you. Ebola, Zika, malaria, and they can resurrect some old diseases and bring them back. Polio. They can cure diseases, or they can give them to you in the prison. You're a prisoner of war. Don't forget that. You're already captured. They're not trying to capture anybody. If you're black, if you have color in your skin, you're already a prisoner of war. You're born in prison. So you conform to the prison rules, and you do it politely. Why? Because to do it arrogantly, this means that you're not going to get prison benefits.
Okay. Thank you, caller, and thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
All righty. Line number two. Wait a minute. Let me do this. TalkToHim@radio.com. We go where you go. Download the TalkToHimRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio, the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And if you would like to get in contact with the show, you can by calling 1-877-932-9766. We've been talking in the fifth area of people activity, which is the law. But if you have a question, you can certainly do so. What is your question, caller, according to the compensatory code? Go ahead.
Hello. Yes, hello.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Fuller. I bought your book back in the early 90s when I was stationed in Virginia. And at first it was hard to even think about complying because it's so stringent. But now I'm 46, and I completely agree. We have to shut all nonsense down and do. I like your code. I like your perspective on what we should do, because otherwise it looks pretty bad. I really don't have a question. I just had a couple comments I wanted to say to you. First of all, I just appreciate you, Mr. Fuller, and I just pray that you can continue to be heard for as long as you can, and I hope as many people pick up on what you're trying to get across for us to be able to survive this nightmare, this prison, as you say. And another thing, your idea of how we communicate with each other as tacky, trashy, and terroristic, I've been running that through my mind, and it's so true. It is so sadly true. And I do have a question. How do we combat that? What is your advice? Like, I find this in my own relationship with my daughter. It's, she's become pretty worldly, so to speak, and it's hard for me to communicate with her, and I find that it always ends up in one of those three areas. So I was hoping maybe you could give me some advice.
Good question, caller. Mr. Fuller?
Always think, speak, and act toward anyone that you're around, white or non-white, in the most constructive manner. Always underline that word in your mind, constructive. Yeah. Meaning cause and effect. You want it always to wind up being constructive, including conversation. There's a passage in the textbook, the Revised Edition, and the older textbook. Minimize conflict by minimizing all unnecessary and or non-constructive contact. That's with anybody, including relatives, close, so-called close friends, distant friends, part-time friends, associates, anybody, white or non-white. Always try to make every contact totally constructive, never non-constructive. And if the person starts talking in a hostile manner when you're trying to be constructive or something like that, just simply, here again, no contact, no conflict. You politely break contact. You'll say, in the exact words, I will talk to you at some other time. You're not saying you won't talk to them ever.
Right.
No, you're just saying you will talk at some other time. When you can do what? When will be that some other time? It might be the next day. It might be next week. It might be a month from now. Whenever both parties are comfortable enough to talk to each other, and you always talk in such a way that you are going to be constructive, and always ask questions. Try to put everything that you say in the form of a question. And some of the major questions, I always say the 4 basic questions that people should ask all day, every day, when they interact with anybody. They are in the code book. And they are these 4 questions. What do you want to do? That's question 1. Everybody on the planet wants to do something. Every ant, every animal, every insect wants to do something. Every person, every elephant wants to do something at some time or another, like this very moment. You want to do something.
Okay.
What do you want to do? Number 2, why do you want to do it? Number 3, how do you plan to do it? How do you plan to do what you want to do? And number 4, what do you expect the constructive result to be? And in talking to just not someone who's kin to you, but into anybody, when it seems like the conversation is breaking down and going nowhere, and people are getting hostile, and their voices raised and all like that, ask those 4 questions. Go into the question mode. Just everybody calm down and ask those 4 questions, and don't help the person with the answers. And don't argue about the answers, because those 4 questions should take everybody exactly where everybody needs to be.
So quickly again, those 4 questions quickly again. What do you want to do?
What do you want to do? That's number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, why do you want to do it? There's got to be a reason why you want to do it. Number 3, how do you plan to do this thing that you want to do? And here's the real bottom line. What do you expect the constructive result to be? And underline that word constructive, because whatever you want to do, you want it to have a constructive result, something that's going to be of real benefit. Now, a person might say that, I want to go get some drugs. I want to go get some cocaine. Why do I want to get it? Because I don't want to feel bad. I want to feel good. How do you plan to get it? I plan to get it by getting in touch with my dealer. Okay, duh. So, number 4, what do you expect the constructive result to be?
Got it. Okay. Thank you, caller, for your call. All righty. Line number 1. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. according to the code?
Oh, yes, Mr. Fuller. You always say that you can learn a lot by watching TV. I was watching Star Trek a couple of years ago, and there was an episode where it was this entity on the ship, and they couldn't figure out why the entity was growing so stronger. So they finally figured out that the reason why the entity was growing so strong is because it was feeding off of the non-constructive behavior of the crew. The hostilities that the crew had with each other, every time they got hostile with each other or acted in a non-constructive manner with each other, the entity would grow. So what they figured out was we just need to start showing each other love and cutting out all the hostilities. And when they started showing each other love and started cutting out all the hostilities between each other, the entity left the ship because it couldn't survive. And, you've been trying to tell us for years about constructive behavior in your thought, speech, and action. And so that's the reason why this entity that we refer to as white supremacy exists. It exists on us being non-constructive in our behavior. So I just wanted you to comment on that.
All right. Mr. Fuller?
Yes. Every move that you make, including sitting down and having a plate of food, either it's going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. Every time you say that you're going across town to do something, it's going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. Every time you get on your telephone, your cell phone, and call someone, that phone call is going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. What you try to do is make every contact that you have, every move that you make, just sitting down eating a plate of food, look at that food on that plate and ask yourself, is this food that I'm fixing to consume going to have a constructive effect on my body and mind, or is it going to have a non-constructive effect on my body and mind? If you're fixing to have that bottle of champagne or vodka, look at the ingredients that go into it.
Yes.
study what does the effect of champagne actually have on the body and mind. That's champagne. You say, we're going to celebrate today, and we're going to have champagne as a part of the celebration. Well, is that champagne going to be constructive? When you actually consume just one glass, it's going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect.
Alrighty.
It's very expensive champagne.
Mm-hmm.
But is it constructive?
That's the question.
Or is it non-constructive?
Okay,
that is the question that you raised in any situation.
Okay.
And it'll take you right where you need to go every time.
Let's get this last call in. Go ahead, caller. You're on with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. What is your question?
Okay, good morning. Real quick, should a person be willing to die for their beliefs? And should that be a measuring stick for the public who listens to that person to believe further into them or to believe that it's a sham?
Okay.
Because they say a people that's willing to die is a people you can't conquer.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
According to the code, that's for the individual to decide. When you start talking about death making, every individual, when it comes to death making, has to decide for him or herself what he or she is going to do or think or say about anything having to do with the death of anyone, including themselves.
So per se, yourself, I'm not to cut you off. Not to cut you off. What about yourself in terms of you? Are you willing to die for your beliefs? Because I co-sign everything you say, but I just wanted to know personally, because it's been on my mind, because you have a lot of leaders that they speak rhetoric, but they're not willing to die, lose their family for what they speak. So that's the question.
And yes, that is the direct question, and the direct answer is I haven't done it yet. I have beliefs, but whether I'm willing to die for it, I haven't done it yet. So that's what evidence Neely Fuller is not willing to die for his beliefs because he's not dead.
All righty.
I'm confused.
I mean, let's look at it the way that it is. So far, he hasn't done it, and he hasn't killed either.
Okay, we're gonna have to go. We're gonna have to go, but brother, you might want to look under the ninth area of war and counter war. And Mr. Fuller, I don't know if that's under MECA, Maximum Emergency Compensatory Action, but
it's covered in the section.
Yes,
just the things that I'm saying now,
right,
and much more. Is about death making.
All righty.
It's covered in the war section of the textbook.
That is the ninth area of people activity. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers. TalkTimeRadio.com.